going to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education for Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. I'd like a motion to adjourn into a board retreat.
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, we're back in session. I'd like to rise for the pledge to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next up is a reading of the mission statement. We are committed to academic achievement and success for all students in a safe environment. In partnership with families in our community, our mission is to promote confidence, inspire a passion for learning, and to prepare our students to become responsible global citizens. Next up is an approval of the revised agenda. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And turn it over to Dr. Hasser for the public hearing for the 2024-2025 Code of Conduct.
Sure. Thank you very much. The Code of Conduct is something that is required annually to be approved by the Board of Education. The 23-24 Code of Conduct was approved by the Board on August 16, 2023. It's required by law to be accompanied by a public hearing where we have to post a draft version of the Code of Conduct on the district website when we publicize the Board of Ed agenda, so that way community members have the ability to review the document if they choose to come in and have any sort of public comment or feedback related to the Code of Conduct. Another requirement of that is to include a cover letter for the Code of Conduct that outlines the various changes that were made in the document from the previous year's version. I sent a memo to the Board of Ed, but the cover letter, when the final draft of the Code of Conduct is posted on the district website, will be from me, and it'll basically share what the changes were. We had two changes this year. The first is a change that we make on an annual basis, which are any updates to DASA coordinators. I should note that we still have some movement of administrators across the school district, and we have a few new administrators who are in the process of becoming DASA certified. Once they get certified, the DASA coordinators have to be approved by the Board of Education. Any DASA coordinators that were rolling over from the previous year were approved by the board at the reorg meeting in July. Any new DASA coordinators that are added once they're trained will get approved by the Board of Ed, and then we'll insert them into the Code of Conduct once they're officially approved. The other change was on page 28 under the emergency situations section. The New York State Ed Safe Schools program changed where they house their emergency protocols, the shell protocol. So we had to update the link because that link that was there was no longer active. The language itself for the shell process remains exactly the same, the protocols that the state outlines. However, it's just that link that was changed. One other item to note, Governor Hochul has been speaking over the last few months about some possible changes that may be coming down from the state regarding cell phone use in schools. Right now, actually last week, she started a state tour where she's going across various regions and meeting with constituents to learn about and develop an opinion related to cell phone use in schools. So there is a possibility over the course of the school year that there may be some additional regulations regarding cell phone use, and that is a section of the Code of Conduct. So in the event that there are new rules or regulations that come out related to that, we may have to revisit the Code of Conduct and make those updates. We normally don't like to make modifications in the Code of Conduct in the middle of the school year because the Code of Conduct is the document that governs student conduct in schools as well as the public, and you want to make sure that you have a consistent standard across the entire school year of how you are establishing expectations. However, if she comes out with updates in any sort of regulations regarding cell phone use, obviously we're going to be required to do that, and you know, there's a possibility that we may have to revisit that. The only other item that is not changed in the Code of Conduct that was something that was considered this year by the committee was the sale of goods in schools. We've had some issues in the last few years of some young entrepreneurs that are bringing various goods to schools, ranging from clothing to cologne to sneakers and things like that. And there was a discussion about putting that in the Code of Conduct, prohibiting the sale of goods in schools. The code of conduct is a legal document, so anytime we make modifications, we reach out to the attorneys and have a conversation with them about it. They actually share with us that that's not something that goes into code of conduct, in the code of conduct, because there's actually policy, Board Policy 7450, which prohibits the sale of any goods in schools, whether it's a student or a community member. So basically, they said, no need to put that in the code of conduct because there's actually board policy that governs that, so it stays out. I don't think that there's anybody signed up. Is there anybody signed up? No. So with that, we are asking board approval of the code of conduct.
I do have a question.
Sure,
Or a request for consideration.
sure.
Since you said that some of the other DASA coordinators will move, ebb and flow, change, get
Yep.
approved, I would like to make a recommendation that the DASA coordinator section be listed and then an appendix be applied. So
Okay.
that we only have to reapprove an appendix
Makes sense.
in the
Yep,
future. So
Yep.
that way the names aren't embedded in the document.
100%.
I think that would just be more efficient.
Rather than having to reapprove the whole document and
Correct.
search for what the changes are, 100%. Yep, we can do that.
Okay.
Sure.
That was all I had.
I just have a comment, not political, but we would think that if she's going to make those changes, that they wouldn't be in the middle of the school year, right? I mean, these are going to be now or for next year?
I don't know.
Oh.
This is one of those things where I can't 100% predict exactly where it's going to go. I've heard a variety of different things. And it also depends upon how she goes about having these. It depends upon how she goes about sort of creating these regulations, whether it's something that she has the state ed department draft up, or whether she actually puts it into a law that has to be approved by the state legislature. So it kind of, there's a lot of ifs that are in that. There's conversations in there about SEL programs, which is a layer of that, educating kids about social media use, which is something that we've talked about as a school district. So I'm not 100% sure exactly what that's going to look like.
So can I just piggyback
Sure.
on that? Because there's currently legislation, regulations, athletic changes that they're making, and they're talking about making those changes come September 6th. So I think that it wouldn't be uncommon that they would in fact come out with something mid-year, and it wouldn't be uncommon for them to say, we'd like this implemented
Immediately,
immediately.
right.
So I think that, knowing that, we should start investigating and looking at the potential of doing similar things such as Middletown. I know that they, and we've struggled with that, but if she's going to come out with that, we should be prepared for that. Because it could be possible that she would say, this is what we've agreed upon, and this is what my expectations are, and schools need to implement this immediately.
And part of the reason why, and cell phone use has been an enduring conversation over the years regarding the code of conduct. We made updates a few years ago in the policy, and one of the reasons why we didn't dig too deeply into it this year was because we didn't want to make modifications in it and then just have to go back and change it if something else were to come down. But I think preparedness, I think, is what Mrs. Rodriguez is talking about. And this is something that I'm paying very close attention to, so that way if something is expected that's a fairly short turnaround, hopefully we can be prepared in order to be able to implement that. So it's just watching it very closely.
And maybe what Elsie suggested, finding out how it's working out. I mean,
Yep.
they're going into their second year now.
Yep.
Right.
Reaching out to the superintendent.
Totally.
there.
Yep.
Any other questions? No. Is there a motion for the approval of the revised, of the Code of Conduct for 2024?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next is Mr. Cahill for the district-wide school safety plan for 2024-2025.
Just give me a minute to sit up here.
Can I didn't do the 7 update or questions. I know that there were no updates, but there are no updates on questions or comments from interested citizens, and there are no interested citizens signed up for questions or comments.
This is yours, Patsy.
Thank you. Mr. Tripodi is joining you for your presentation.
He is indeed. So, good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Patrick Cahill. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Management Services. To my left, Mr. Joseph Tripodi, who is the Director of Security here at Monroe-Woodbury. So, we're going to go through a safety plan, kind of an overview. In other years, we've done this a little more informally, but I assure you this is brief. And it's going to be at a high level because the district-wide safety plan is sort of a high-level document. It's about policy and procedures at a very high level. So just to take a moment and talk about the process here. So the process is sort of an overview for the board, which is what we're doing tonight. There is a 30-day comment period for the public. So we generally post this to the website. There would then be a hearing, right, later in August, towards the end of the month, and then the board would adopt the plan. So there's also a team, a district-wide team involved, and the team would review this plan as well. And what I'm proposing to do is send the board an email with a recommendation about the team members. And it's supposed to be a cross-section of folks. In prior years, I was on the team. Dr. Viaz was on the team. Joe is on the team. We have a teacher. We have an administrator, et cetera. There's a couple of board members who are on the team. So the team would review the plan. And if they had some input or feedback, provide that to us, and we could, take that into consideration and update that. So that's something that I'm proposing we do in the next few days. And generally, we want this sort of approved and wrapped up by the start of school, right? So forgive me for the wordiness of some of these slides, but I made a joke. It's an old saying. I don't know if it was Mark Twain or who said, I didn't have time to make it shorter. So that's really where we're at. So this is a requirement, school safety plan, under the New York State Safe Schools Against Violence in Education, the SAVE legislation. So it's law and it's also regulation governed by New York State Ed Department regulation. The idea is to provide a sort of a comprehensive approach to dealing with and addressing school safety and violence prevention. I think in the past, prior to this, it was a very hodgepodge kind of thing with districts. So this is comprehensive, and it would make it uniform to some degree, district to district. The key elements of the plan, so it's district-wide and building-level emergency response plans and teams. And so this is the district-wide plan. So again, high level, it's public. The building plans are not public. They're confidential. So we have a team at the district level. We have teams at the building level. We have building-based threat assessments. We discussed that in the plan, so that's very important. We've done a lot of training with that. We've compiled the teams. We have a district chief emergency officer, so that's typically Mr. Tripodi here. We have ongoing training for students and staff, drills and training, et cetera. Policies and procedures that are responsive to threats or acts of violence. We have procedures to contact law enforcement or parents and guardians in the event of an incident. Prevention, intervention strategies. We have ways to improve communication between law enforcement and the community, parents and guardians, and obviously procedures to carry out during drills and emergencies. The approval process, I touched on that already, really. So we're reviewing this, we're presenting this publicly. We're going to post it to the website for a 30-day comment period. The plan focused on policy and district-wide rules, not locationally specific. And then we have our public hearing and the BOE adoption. So occasionally, a district would make no changes to the plan. Nothing's really changed. For the upcoming year, 24-25, there are some changes, recommendations based on SED, State Ed Department. So I think the most important one really is to conduct trauma-informed drills and training. And so what that means is to avoid tactics that are shocking or, as I wrote up here, introduce or activate trauma. So we'd avoid things like the use of props or actors or simulations that are upsetting to students or staff. In some ways it's kind of obvious, but I'm glad that SED is saying, don't avoid these things, don't do these things. The other piece of it would be including appropriate school staff like psychologists or social workers when developing the training so that it's age-appropriate kind of training. So the idea, and I like this little phrase that I read, it says the goal of drills is to practice and prepare, not scare. So, right, it seems self-evident, but not necessarily. And I think, sometimes these things would be so realistic, they would be upsetting to people and to kids. Related to that, there's three things that are actually related, is written consent from parents if we're going to do something, and I've written non-trauma informed exercises. So that means if we're going to do something that simulates a real event or emergency, we would need consent from parents that if the kids are going to participate with that. The other thing the regulation says is it shouldn't occur during the school day, it shouldn't occur if there's any activities going on school grounds. So probably a good idea to avoid that sort of thing. The other thing, which is again related to the trauma-informed drills, is the idea to announce that it's a drill. So this has been a little bit of not a controversy, but a discussion over the years. I've come across people that say, oh, I like it to be realistic. So it's good that SED is finally coming down and saying you must or you should announce it's a drill. We should do it in a consistent language, a consistent way. So when conducting a drill, it should always be announced that it's a drill, not an emergency, not an actual emergency. So this was a recommendation. We say something like, this is a drill, not an actual emergency. This is a drill. We are now practicing how to lock down. This is a drill. There's other ways to do it. You could say, this is a drill. Joe and I have talked about it. This is a drill. This is a drill. Lockdown. This is a drill. But we want to be consistent, and we want people to know it's not an actual emergency. Parental notification of upcoming drills. That's actually pretty big. So they're recommending that we, approximately a week in advance, notify parents that there's actually a drill coming. Include bus drivers and monitors in the district-wide and building teams. And then finally, the last bullet I have there is Workplace Violence Prevention Act. So that's actually not related to the school safety plan, but it is new for 24-25, and it requires public employers to develop a workplace violence prevention program. Ms. Hawk is working on that with the HR department, so that's something that we may roll out soon and talk about in the near future.
Mr. Cahill, I have a
Yes.
question, just going back up to the bullet where it says written consent from parents. What would something like that look like under this new plan? What type of item would require written consent?
Well, I think if we were going to do something, let's say we were going to have police at a building, right? And we wanted to have, it was an exercise, and we wanted to have it be realistic, so students would be there and be part of that, be in classrooms, that kind of thing. And they participate in something that was, like real life. That, again, it's not trauma-informed. It has the potential to be upsetting to students, so we'd want parents to say, yeah, it's okay that they're there or they participate in that.
So a fire drill?
No. A fire drill, when we think of trauma-informed, it would be like the words they've used would be use of props, actors, simulations, or other tactics intended to
So the mock
mimic
accident at the
a
high
school
Mock
shooting.
accident in the high school.
Okay.
Yep.
that
Yep.
helps.
So that's included in this, or they would not be able to do that without consent? or
I don't think the mock accident would be included in this when they say mimic a school shooting, incident of violence, or other emergency. Maybe.
So something.
Well, it says avoid tactics that introduce or activate trauma.
Right.
That's,
So it would,
right.
I suppose.
So I think we need to reevaluate that.
Yeah.
Basically, anything that will create a psychological situation where somebody can interpret as.
Because
Correct.
there are ambulances on site.
Yep.
Incidents of violence or other emergency.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Other emergency.
What happens if a parent does not give consent? What happens to a child during that?
Well,
Well, they wouldn't participate then.
So if the school is practicing the drill, where do those kids go?
Well, number one, what they're saying, I believe, is that we shouldn't have a non-trauma informed exercise during the school day. So number one, kids, if they're there, I believe, this is new regulation, they're there specifically to be participants in the exercise. So that's number one. They're saying these exercises shouldn't occur during the school day or when school activities are occurring. So it's really kind of off hours, and if you're there and you're participating, you're aware of it, you've signed off on it, you've agreed to be part of it.
So who are we really training? Are we training the staff? Or are we training the students?
Who's
Because if the
they?
students are not there,
Who's they? They keep saying. I mean, who's the person providing this or the group that's providing this?
The
I agree
training,
with the doctor, like to do an event without any students in here, unless you're doing a staff specific, it's pointless. right? To exercise for us
Well,
white folks, like,
Right.
it doesn't make
The
any
kids don't know
sense.
how to
Well,
act.
what I'm saying is if we were going to have the local law enforcement do an exercise, right? And I mean, even if nobody's there, it's beneficial to know where the building is, know where things are in the building. It's beneficial for them to practice going through a building and treating it like a real exercise. So there could be benefit to, an exercise and a drill without students present.
Right, so that's what I'm asking, it's for the responders.
Yes, in that case, it would be, yes.
I mean, obviously, the responders should be able to have
Right.
that ability to know the schools as best of their abilities, but also to know the schools, where the foot traffic is, where the exit points are going to be. I mean, some of us have done this many times, and it's pointless to do it without the students there. And if the students are going to opt out, then one, the student isn't getting that experience to know what they're supposed to be doing when, God forbid, an event occurs. And then, depending on what our opt-out rate is, it may not be value added to anybody, right? Listen, I'm not saying I know the answer, I was just saying, here's what would be my
Well, what's the
concern.
plan? How will it be facilitated? Written consent from parents. At the beginning of the year, are you going to ask for written consent?
No, it's not that.
In general?
Yeah, I don't think it's that. I just want to go back to one thing you were saying, Jeff. I don't think we're saying we're not going to do drills in a realistic way. I think the idea of the trauma-informed drill is we're trying to avoid traumatizing people, setting them off and upsetting them. I think everything else it would run at real speed, 100%. Everything would be treated in a realistic way. We're just not going, I know I think it was North Main,
Main at Jubilee.
several years ago, had a realistic drill with casualties. I mean, I don't believe children were there.
No.
It was really for first responders, but with casualties and people, with fake blood and that sort of thing. So that's what they're really talking about. We're not saying we're not gonna drill authentically. We would. And Dawn, to your point, I'm not sure all the details of this have been worked out. I believe this actually takes effect the end of July. So that kind of detail, how are we going to do that? I'm not sure if we're even going to do any, I use the term non-trauma informed exercises. I don't believe we do anything like that, do we, Joe?
No, we don't use any students and any props. The only drills that we do, say the lockdown would be the most traumatic one. It's a drill. We announce it's a drill. The only thing we haven't been doing is giving them a week's notice. As far as the student, the consent, the only time the consent is needed from the parents if we were going to use the student as a prop. The student was going to be a victim. We don't need a parent's consent to have a lockdown drill as long as we give them a week's notice.
Okay, that helps.
That.
Right.
Okay.
That clarifies.
I guess my only final question would be the definition of trauma, right? Or non-trauma, because that could be we all could have a very different answer to that. So I think we just need to be clear when we're defining whatever that is, that, again, it's clear, so that parents and staff and faculty and everybody's on the same page of this is what a non-trauma event would be defined as.
I think what we do would be a non-trauma event. I think they're trying to say props, actors, simulations, other tactics intended to mimic a school shooting or incident of violence. Like I said at North Main, where they actually had victims laying on the ground, with fake blood and that sort of thing.
When we're communicating that, I think it just needs to be very clear, right? So
Right.
I think I agree, I think I understand, but I think I understand, right? So I think to keep it, people who aren't smart like me, where it's just a line that says, hey, fire drills and lockdowns, they do not occur. It would be these types of things, right? So when a parent when we're communicating to parents, that they read that, it's very clear to them so that the cabinet and the rest of us don't get 1,000 emails in the first fire drill and say, hey, my kid had trauma in this fire drill. You know what I mean? Why was I not notified a week out, right? That's all I'm trying to do, is so that we're communicating clearly to the community.
Do our
They
drills
understand.
include students getting under desks and rattling doorknobs and similar situations?
No, none of our drills involve any of that. We keep them as simple and as informative as we can. So our typical lockdown drill in all 7 of our schools, we will announce we have not been sending out a week's notice because that was not the regulations until this point. We will start the drill by saying, most of the staff is informed beforehand, but we will start the drill by saying, this is a drill, this is a drill, this is a drill, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. Now, once we do that, the staff and the students will lock down, they pull the shades down, they lock their doors, they get into a corner, they do as mimicking of a real lockdown as they can. There are no props, nobody walks around shaking the door, nothing else. Once the lockdown is done, we will walk to each and every door. Now, we don't have enough law enforcement to have them key open the doors as they would normally do in a regular lockdown. We, the staff, myself, the administrator, safety, will walk to every door, open up the door, tell them the drill is over, did a great job, thank you very much, make sure the doors are locked, and then at one point we'll say keep in a hold in place, stay in a hold in place until we tell you that the drill is over. Once all the doors have been opened up, the announcement will come over the PA, the drill is over, the hold in place is done, great job, have a nice day.
Is this procedure in place for substitutes that are in our building for the first time? Do they know what's happening when this occurs?
Well, normally what will happen is the administrator, the staff, by and large, will let the teachers know that there's going to be a lockdown. It's not necessary that they do that. Some of the administrators do not tell the staff the second or third lockdown to kind of make it realistic, but they still announce that it's a drill. I would assume that the substitutes are informed at some point prior to the lockdown how they should proceed if there's a lockdown drill while they're there.
Can somebody answer that? Is
There's
that part of
typically a
the?
folder in each building that has all of the emergency protocol in it, and the substitutes are briefed. If they, that day, hopefully they get that information, but they should be prepared from the time they start subbing in that building of the emergency protocol. It is in a folder and it is available.
And the subs have to check into the main office. You can't just go down to a classroom. They check into the main office, they get a lanyard with an
they'll be
ID,
told
and then
there's
they
gonna
also
be a
receive
drill
a
today.
folder about the emergency protocol. A lot of times there might be a roster in there and everything else, yeah.
And I think now with the new ruling, that you have to let them know a week in advance, subs should know, well in advance. I know they sometimes come in a day, but they'll be told, that today's going to be a drill, so they'll be aware of that.
When they're hired, Lori, are they given protocol as to what happens?
They go through a substitute orientation. One of the challenges with that is that each building is different. And each building is slightly different in terms of, the maps, but we tell them, this is what you'll get in the main office, this is what's included in that packet, please review it. So they will have to do that. If they work at North Main one day, and then the next week they're over at Central Valley, they do have to get reacquainted with everything that's in that folder.
And I think a lot of that information also was required to be posted in the classroom. Like, every room, I think, has the evacuation protocol as well as the shell description of all of the different types of drills that can happen. And so, like, there's requirements of, aside from it being in the folder, it has to be visibly accessible in all of the classrooms.
This, too, has made a difference for people in
Yep.
feeling comfortable in what they're doing on a daily basis, where in the moment, when something is called, everyone can check. Every single employee has this on the back, and it'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Hopefully, you know before that, but this does make people more comfortable, especially in the moment.
Perfect segue to our shell.
You're welcome.
So, this is an important part of the plan. I just put this up here as, our emergency response. It's a New York State mandated thing, and it's SHELL is an acronym for shelter in place, hold in place, evacuate, lockout, lockdown. So we've all seen this. So shelter in place is typically used if there's a weather event, right? It's safer to be inside the school than outside. Hold in place is typically a short-term sort of emergency, non-life-threatening. We just want everyone to kind of stay in the classrooms. Evacuation is your old school fire drill. Lockout, there's something going on outside the building. It could be an animal, it could be law enforcement activity, but it's safer to come inside and keep the building locked. And then finally, lockdown is obviously the most serious event or condition. So lockdown, secure students and staff inside locked classrooms during incidents that pose an immediate threat of violence in or around the school. So that's the lockdown.
Is this information on our website?
I believe it is, but I cannot say for sure. It is around the district.
I just looked at Carol.
All of our schools have this, and every school's got this all over
Yep.
this. We sent people out posting them all over last year.
We have dozens and dozens of these around.
Okay.
And as Lori mentioned, it's the back of the
Check
ID
mine,
too.
though.
It's not the parents, just the calendar, the printed calendar.
Okay, and so this is another, just element that we grabbed out of the district-wide plan, the incident command system. Joe, can you give us an overview?
Sure. The New York State Education Commission requires that the building-level emergency plans delineate the school's chain of command during an emergency in a manner consistent with the incident command system. The Incident Command System, or ICS as we know it, is a standardized approach to the command, control, and coordination of emergency response. It provides a common hierarchy and standard management procedures enabling responders to be effective. ICS is used in managing temporary incidents of any size and is widespread in use today by emergency responders. ICS has basic goals: clear communication, accountability, and efficient use of resources that are common to incident emergency management. For our schools, the principal assumes control and management responsibility when activating the incident command system. That being said, we don't activate the school's ICS team for every day-to-day incident. For relatively small incidents, it's possible that the principal will not establish an ICS team, and in this case, they are responsible for performing all of the incident management functions. However, it is more common for the principal to designate several supervisors and administrators to assist in managing the functions at an incident. As the incident grows, the principal may activate other personnel as needed. In turn, each individual activated by the principal may activate others needed to complete the necessary functions. The principal, as the incident commander, directs all the overall management of the emergency response activities, and that role can be transferred to another individual, say an assistant superintendent, police officer, or firefighter, depending on the emergency as they arrive on scene. An important part to note is that when it comes to the scene of a school emergency, for instance, a fire, the fire department may have control of the incident, but our administrators and staff are still and always responsible for our students.
Thanks, Joe. And finally, I just wanted to kind of bring it back to the district goals. So the last couple of years, we've had a district goal that related to safety. So in 22-23, we had a safety audit that was conducted by Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. We had findings and reports that they provided to us. We've started to roll those out, those recommendations and enhancements. So, some of these were procurement of building maps, which we've done. And we're actually even enhancing that by taking our building maps, digitizing them. Actually, we're taking it even further. We've procured supplies. We did a digital radio project. We replaced all the existing radios with a couple of hundred of new digital radios with repeaters, so it enhanced our communication, made it a more unified system, better interoperability. So that was a big thing. We've done a lot more staff training and professional development. Obviously, we talk about Shell. We've talked about incident command. We've done a lot of threat assessment training. We had Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES available for consultations with building teams, building emergency response teams, and that's ongoing. And we've done a lot for the infrastructure, a lot of sort of capital work. We're in the process, that's what WIP is, work in process, ongoing, adding security vestibules to the buildings that don't already have them. We've upgraded the classroom door locks, where the door can be locked from the inside with a push of a button, turn of a knob. We added door window shades, classroom and door exterior numbering system, additional security cameras, door access control. We continue to have the SRO program. So we've done a lot to enhance safety in the last few years. And that's all we had for this evening. Any questions?
I do. So for buildings like North Main, where there are areas where the walls don't go all the way to the top, how are these security protocols being implemented in those buildings where you can't lock a door and be isolated and that type of thing?
I will say, Mr. Cotto is very instrumental in trying to do the best that he could, given that there's open classrooms in North Main. The main area there where the library is, there's like a door with, it's got pictures of books. And that door would be opened up, and the students would go in there, the door would be locked, and that would be the way that he would keep them in the lockdown position.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you. Eric's very excited about the next presentation for the middle school update with Dr. Hassler and Mr. Berger.
Mr. Berger's even more excited.
I can tell.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to the board this evening. This is actually an update to a presentation that was given on June 14, 2023, when Mr. Berger spoke to the board about a recommendation they were making regarding the middle school schedule and advisory being at the beginning of the day, and some challenges that they were encountering due to that scheduling issue. And the board had asked for an update in terms of the status of that. I think I sent the boardgram in the middle of the year with some tentative updates, but this is kind of a reporting back of how things are going. So to start is kind of an overview of the schedule, the way that it existed before the change.
Great. Yes, good evening, and thank you to Superintendent Rodriguez, Deputy Superintendent Norman, the Superintendent's Cabinet, our Board of Education members. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As Dr. Hassler mentioned, if you recall, going back a little bit over a year ago, we presented a scheduling change for advisory, and that came as a result from our scheduling committee that we put together at the middle school, and this was a recommendation that came from that committee. So if we look at the previous schedule that you see in front of you, a couple of things to highlight where you'll note some changes. Advisory started first thing in the morning at 8:15 after AM classes. We had 40-minute periods. We had 3-minute intervals in between those for passing time for students to get to their next class, going through 9th period, which was 41 minutes in length, and that additional minute was put in place to allow for end-of-the-day announcements. So that's the schedule that was put in place. We, as Dr. Hassler mentioned, my first year in the building was 22-23, and there were a number of questions I think that were raised by myself in collaboration with the scheduling committee, and we quickly kind of identified some things that we would like to streamline, make a little bit more efficient as far as the building practices go for our students, for our families, and for our teachers. A couple of those concerns or questions that were raised, first and foremost, was the student absences and student tardiness at the beginning of the day, with advisory starting at 8:15. And I think, too, coming out of COVID, we had a lot of parents that were dropping students off. But knowing that first period wasn't necessarily an academic class, that kind of allowed students to gradually come in between that 8:15 to 8:35 time period. And we had a lot of student tardiness, a lot of absences to that advisory period, which also led to some student management not concerns, but again, you had unstructured time in the beginning of the day. We have a great safety team, but at 8:15, they go to their posts throughout the building, and it was difficult as you have kids that are hundreds and hundreds of kids that are coming in each day between these 20 minutes to kind of gather them up and get them into their advisory classes when, again, it wasn't necessarily an academic period. There were concerns about a loss of instructional time, if you recall, because at the end of the day, particularly in the 9th period, we had no fault of theirs, but we have a lot of student athletes that with their seasons, they typically and routinely meet to go out for their games or get on the bus for away games around 2:40 2:45 in some cases. So when ninth period ends at 3 o'clock, you're missing out on 15, 20 minutes of instruction every single day. We did have a couple of musical events as well, competitions that students left, but for the vast majority, it was a lot of athletics. There were a lot of interruptions into our ninth period because while we buffer 1 minute into that ninth period for announcements, the reality is that any announcements that would need to be made for students took a lot longer than 1 minute at the end of the day. We had challenges coming out of ninth period and getting students to go to their lockers. And again, that unstructured time, the amount of time it took for students to go to their lockers, fraternize, get them out of the building and onto the buses and get our buses out of the middle school so that we can start our pickup process, it was taking entirely too long. We also saw some concerns with just the drop-off process in general. The long lines that we were experiencing, not only for kids at our attendance window, but for parents who were dropping their kids off and the cars were being backed up all the way down, Dunninger Road, to Ninninger, and it was creating quite a traffic, hazard as well in the morning. So those were some of the challenges that we identified in our previous schedule. So we presented that we were going to move to our current schedule that you see in front of you. The difference is that period 1 starts at 8:15 rather than advisory. So that is an academic class where we are asking and mandating students to be in their classrooms by 8:15. We also add an additional 5 minutes to that first period, and that essentially is our homeroom. And what that allows us to do is it's for teachers to take their all-day attendance. It allows those students that are coming in, around 8:15, it gives them another minute or so to get to their classroom. That's when we do our morning announcements. So the instruction actually really typically, it starts at 8:20. We still have a 40-minute period from 8:20 to 9 o'clock, but again, we have that 5-minute buffer for homeroom first period. We continue to have 3-minute passing time. If you notice the difference between ninth period and advisory, though, there are 5 minutes in between. And the reason we did that is we had students go to their lockers, collect all of their belongings before going to advisory. That was the one time that they took their backpacks in at the end of the day. That way, at the end of advisory at 3 o'clock, rather than going to to their lockers and us taking 10 minutes to try to get them out of the building, they immediately left advisory and went directly to their buses. The other piece is that we did shorten advisory by 6 minutes in length as well. So the new schedule, some of the highlights that we presented last year, one of the main goals was to decrease school tardiness, and we'll talk about those findings in the next slide. Again, we wanted to make the dismissal process smoother. We wanted to allow for more instructional time. We also needed to kind of redefine advisory a little bit and make it so that it fit the needs of our kids and our teachers, and that included really an end-of-the-day wrap-up with our students to check their planners, make sure they have their assignments. If they forgot something, that was the opportunity for them to go back to their locker and get it, rather than get home and not have their materials and either have a parent bring them back at 5 o'clock to try to get in the building, or them not do it at all and, suffer those consequences as well. So it allowed for an end of the day kind of wrap up. It also allowed us to have announcements at the end of the day during that advisory period. We continued to use that period of time for guidance counselors and administrators to meet with individual students for check-ins. The dean did mediation sessions. We used the time to acknowledge students' efforts. We did our Random Acts of Kindness, our Purple Pride Awards, our Crusader Cash Redemption, which is a building-wide incentive that we do. It allowed for student council to be dismissed 10 minutes or so earlier if necessary when we were doing student and council events, because previously, if they needed to leave at 2:50 because they needed to organize an event that was starting at 3 o'clock for the student body after school, they ended up missing 10 minutes of instruction. So this kind of allowed them to do all that while making sure that we are increasing their instructional time for ninth period. So the findings, this is what you're so excited for. The findings, we saw that there was a 23% reduction in school tardy. So that is from at 8:15 in the previous schedule to 8:15 first period, there were about 2,000 less instances of student tardiness. That's at 8:15. As we dug a little bit deeper into that to look at 8:20, because that's really when the instruction, we don't like to tell a lot of people that, but that's when the instruction really starts is 8:20. We give that 5-minute buffer. That number reduced dramatically and, was about 5,500 less instances, which was actually about a 64% reduction in school tardies from moving it from the beginning of the day to the end of the day as far as advisory goes. We also had a 29% reduction in advisory absences. Again, there were about over 4,000 instances of less absences in advisory comparing at the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Looking further at that as well, that did include all-day absences, though. So if a student was absent for the full day, they were obviously absent for advisory as well. That did include early dismissal pickups. So we looked a little bit more into those early dismissal pickups, and we found that 91% of our early dismissal pickups happened prior to 2:40. So those are kids that were sick. The health office called, they had to leave early. Those are students that were picked up early for doctor's appointments or whatever personal reasons by a family, but we had only 9%. There were only 500 kids over the course of the whole school year that were dismissed between 2:40 and the end of ninth period is 2:44, between 2:40 and 3 o'clock. So there was
500 incidents.
500
not
incidents.
500 kids.
Incidents.
500
Sorry,
incidents. Yep.
yes.
Yep.
So there was quite a bit of a reduction in both of those areas. So we viewed that as a positive. Managing student behavior. While our student discipline referrals decreased over the course of the year again last year, I don't know that I would attribute that entirely to a change in advisory, but it did allow us to monitor the behaviors because there was less unstructured time in the beginning of the day and also at the end of the day as well, with the students exiting the building. Like I said, in the past, it took about 10 minutes to get the kids out of the building and onto the buses. We had the entire building emptied out on an average of less than 3 minutes a day by the time that it hit 3 o'clock to the time that they were out of the building, which meant that our student vans, which leave the middle school first, they were leaving on average at 3:05. In the previous year, the kids were still in the hallways at that time, and we were trying to manage them. On a whole, it allowed for the buses to leave and the dismissal process to speed up about 7 minutes a day on average. So we felt that was a big benefit as well, moving advisory to the end of the day. Arrival and dismissal process. So we tried to make it a little bit easier, and we changed the way that the parents are dropping off students in the morning. We separated part of the parking lot from the buses and the vans so that it wasn't quite as chaotic. I know it's a work in progress. We're still looking at ways to refine it and make it a little bit better for next year as well. But there certainly, for at least 3/4 of the year, there were a little bit more cars lined up, I think, in the spring. Some of the students, I think, with larger bags for athletics in the spring with lacrosse and baseball and softball and so forth. There were a few more drop-offs, but on a whole, it was much better getting cars in and out of the parking lot this school year, and we're going to continue to look into that for next year and try to make a few small more modifications to that. Staff survey findings. We did survey the staff at the end of the school year, asking for their feedback as well, and the overwhelming majority prefer, comparing advisory in the beginning to the end of the day. They would prefer to have it at the end of the day for all of the reasons that we mentioned. It still allowed for groups of students to meet during their advisory, the NJHS, our school safe ambassadors, student council. They still met as a group during that time, which was helpful for their advisors. But the overwhelming majority of the staff preferred to have it at the end of the day. One of the things, as we were looking into advisory on a whole, we asked the staff just for other feedback, and one of the things that came back from the survey was the recommendation to go back to our pre-pandemic days at the middle school, where advisory consisted of students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. It was changed during COVID to kind of cohort the students so that they were with the same students in the same grade levels. So the past couple of years, it maintained that way, where advisory was by grade level. The staff asked to go back to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and that kind of goes back to the intent of advisory of making connections with kids and, being a trusted adult for them if they come in at sixth grade, staying with that group of kids through sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. So that is something that came of that as a result of the survey from this fall, from the spring, that we're going to then implement for this coming fall as well. On a whole, we still have some things to look at, but I think that we definitely made some very positive gains and strides this year with the change in advisory to the schedule, so.
So, can you clear something up for me? So, school tardiness is defined as making it here by whatever that time is when the advisory used to start, right?
School tardiness, is that what you said? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, school tardiness, is technically at 8:15.
So, the 8:15 is the first period. So, when you say that there was a 55% reduction in school tardiness, that was counting the first period.
There was a 23% reduction starting at 8:15. When we compare the 22-23 school year to the 23-24 school year at 8:15, which 22-23 was advisory, last year was first period, there were about 2,000 less instances, which was 23%. But when we remove that 8:15 to 8:20 slot that we allowed for homeroom, that number jumped to a 64% reduction.
And the reason why we looked at that data was because part of the goal of this, as Chris said, was maximizing instructional time, not having kids missing out on that instructional time. So he looked deeper at that 8:20 time slot because the question was, okay, so you had a 23% reduction in period one, that's great, but that's still an instructional period. Does that mean that you still have a large number of kids that may be potentially missing that academic time? But the lates were not late beyond 8:20. The lates were, you had a 63% reduction in kids that were coming in by 8:20 and not missing out on instructional time that first period. So I think that there's still work to be done.
There is, and a lot of that was the kids were being dropped off by 8:15 probably, but it took them 5 minutes to get through the line and get them into
So now the parents know
class.
that the instructional time starts earlier, so they drop the
You got to
kids
drop,
earlier.
correct. One of the questions that was asked last year was, during the presentation was, by having advisory through 8:32, if the belief was advisory was not an instructional period, that means that parents were dropping kids off for a roughly 20-minute time frame. Now, if we're saying 8:15 is the time that you have to have your child dropped off, is that problematic in terms of the drop-off process because you're now squeezing everybody in about a 10-minute window, including the buses? And that was one of the reasons why Chris spoke about the arrival process as well being streamlined. One of the things that we ask parents always is to have your kids ride the bus. Like, the best way to be able to avoid all of these conversations is to put your child on the bus. They will get to school on time, and you don't have to worry about any sort of traffic issues. That minimizes that, and I think that is one of the things that was
It is,
found.
and we looked at other things, outside of just the scheduling change and the ways to get kids into the classrooms faster. And part of that was separating the parking lot so that we had the buses just coming in on one side. We printed, passes if we had a bus that unfortunately was running a few minutes late and they got there at, 8:13, rather than that entire bus standing and trying to go through the attendance, we had passes ready for them to go. They were color-coded. We did a whole building-wide color-coded pass system that we put in place so that the safety officers, starting at 8:15, can very quickly identify whether or not the student is supposed to be in class or not. In the past, everybody kind of had the same white generic pass that was crumpled up, and nobody really knew if anything was written on it because,
It may
the
be
way
3 months old.
it could be 3 months old. I mean, this was all stamped with a date, color-coded. So we put a couple other things in place trying to get kids in class and not have them, loitering around the school. But this was really focused on the scheduling change.
Yeah, I have a question. When you say there was a 23% change, is that over the whole year?
Yes.
And because September might have been less than June, or
It definitely was. June
because
is always the highest.
as people got accustomed to this new schedule versus the other one, more of an effort might have been made to get the kids here on time.
Yes, I mean, historically, if you go back, and we did look at a month-by-month attendance data over, a series of years, June was always the highest with absences and with student tardiness in the morning.
And if you look back at the update that I sent mid-year, the actual rate of lateness actually dropped a little bit from, because I reported it, I think it was November or December. So because of that, the springtime, you start to see people being a little bit more late. So the rate of lateness actually did drop a bit, the percentage from those earlier months to the later months.
So what is the final goal? What number would you say is, because obviously you guys didn't look at if the same people are late over and over and over. You're just looking at the averages, right?
We did actually. Yes, we did look into that as well, and we did it on a month-by-month basis, though. So, I mean, I do have those numbers, but you have some of the kids, so we looked at the number of instances that students were late in September, and how many of those were the same kids. So we looked at that on a month-by-month basis, which, you know, and then we take that, we bring it back to our data team, we bring it back to our building level teams and discuss how to make these improvements and make things better. What it doesn't necessarily show, and we had a couple of our staff members that went to Power School University and learned some new tricks, you know, I'll call them. So we're going to be putting some other things that are in place that we didn't even know that were necessarily available to us. And those staff members are very excited about, you know, some of the new things that they learned in Power School, and are looking forward to making some of these changes so that we can really pinpoint a lot of the data that you're speaking of. But we did look at a month-by-month basis. I just don't have, like, you know, there are a number of students that were late multiple times in September. Those same students were late multiple times in October.
And that's the reason why originally when Chris made the comment about 530 or whatever students,
Yes.
and I kind of corrected saying it was instances,
Yes.
it may be 40 kids that make up, 30, 40 kids that make up the bulk of those 500 instances because they may have been late to school 80 times over the span of the year. So that data does exist, but some of those circumstances are much more individualized rather than global.
Right. I mean, life happens.
Right.
You can't expect 100%
Right.
attendance all the time. So where would you be happy?
I think that we made a lot of positive gains, you know, this year. And I always shoot for higher, you know, and, you know, you always want to have improvements
happy at
year to
zero.
year. But I was pleased with the gains that we made this year. Again, that's why we take this data back and we look to see, well, how can we make it even better? And sometimes it's like tinkering here and there and trying different things and seeing what works. And it's also trying to come up with other building procedures and practices. Like I said, the color-coded pass system, that helped out tremendously with all of this and just identifying kids that were being late and not getting to class on time. So sometimes it's just little things like that that could help support the end goal.
And is it safe to assume that if a child is chronically tardy, that guidance would look into it?
Yes, they get phone calls from guidance counselors and administrators. We always, as Dr. Hasser said, recommend that we provide transportation as a district as well, which is going to ensure that your kid gets to school on time. So sometimes that's a little bit of a battle that we go back and forth on. But yes, there certainly is follow-up. Then really, if kids are cutting class, we also have a discipline referral process that goes along with that as well.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this already, but is tardiness recorded as a student enters or when they get to first period?
When they enter the building. If they walk in, it depends on when they come. If the student walks in after 8:15, they have to check in and they have to get a pass and they're marked tardy. If they walk into the building
On time.
and then wander the hall and then walk in, then the teacher marks them tardy.
And is there a cutoff for breakfast? Like if they go to breakfast and loiter back to their class?
So that was one of the other things that we put in place was, because that was again something else that I questioned and brought up, with this building-wide pass system that we looked into this previous year, we gave some pre-stamped passes to the food service so that kids that were coming in after 8:10, we then changed the lunch to grab and go, and they were able to take their breakfast and go, and they were given a color-coded pass that said from food services beyond 8:10, so that the teacher then knew, and they got that, they knew that they came from the cafeteria, Obviously, if they got a pass and it's at 8:10 and they're walking into the room at 8:35, well, then there are going to be some questions. But if they get there relatively quickly, then even if it's after 8:15, they're not marking it as tardiness.
But in that situation, the teacher's the one that marks that in
Right.
the system. Correct.
Okay, any other questions?
No, this was a great update.
Great, thank you very much.
Great job.
Enjoy your evening.
You too now.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
What is, Eric staying there?
There you go.
Okay. All right, next up is the approval of minutes from July 2nd, 2024. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And then next is the approval of the 2024 Board of Education Manual. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of the Board of Education Committees. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the updated instructional calendar for 2024-2025. The change was, Eric?
Yeah, so when the Regents schedule originally came out, there was a Regents date on, I believe it was June 4th and June 10th from the State Ed Department. The state realized that that was 2 consecutive weeks, and it's a little bit problematic in terms of scheduling, so they changed the Regents date from June 4th to June 11th. So now we have Regents exams that are being administered on back-to-back days, June 10th and June 11th. That's exclusively stuff from, information from State Ed.
Okay. Is there any question? Motion?
Motion?
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of the updated Board of Education meeting calendar. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of amendment of Title IX officers. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there anything you want to share? What was the change?
No, essentially what we had done previously was we had our Title IX officers tied to positions, Assistant Superintendent for HR, Director of ESS. With Kristen Randhair's retirement, the position for this year was not necessarily being assigned to that director. Karen Jordan is one of the Title IX officers.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is the approval of personnel items 11.1 through 11.14. Ms. Hawk?
Yes, I'd like to ask the board for approval for the items listed under personnel this evening. I'd also like to recognize Gina Matisse, who is in the audience this evening. She is being recommended as a CSE chairperson.
There's a question with that, Ms. Hawk.
Yes.
So the CSE chairperson in the documents doesn't have a salary attached. Is there a salary that,
Because Gina is staying in her tenure area, it is a teacher that is assigned as a CSE chairperson. Her salary is exactly what it was. So we didn't publish it, but I can get that information for you.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Business and financial, Mr. Cahill?
Thank you. So I would respectfully request the approval of business and financial items 12.1 through 12.4.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of committees on special education and preschool education, 13.1 through 13.5. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And reports by Board of Education committees. Ms. Novak?
Nothing to report to.
Oh, you're not a committee member, sorry.
I was like, where's her? She's like, wait.
That was good. That was good.
I wasn't prepped on that one.
Just keep a bit.
Wow,
that's good. That was a
Jumping
test.
ahead to the end of the meeting. Motion?
Those are the reports by Education Committee, so that would be audit, visitation.
Oh, so we don't have them, we just voted on them today.
Yep,
Right,
so
so
there's nothing to.
There's no reports. Okay.
Unless someone knows dates that they've selected, but, okay.
Now, Ms. Novak, it's for you to share some comments, if you'd like.
No, thank you.
Ms. Donahue.
Good evening, and I'd like to wish everyone an enjoyable rest of the summer, and thank you for the presentations. They were very informative, and have a good evening.
Okay, Ms. Evans.
Mirroring Ms. Donahue, thank you for all the presentations. We're very excited to see all of the positive changes that are being made for the school year. Enjoy your summer. Looking forward to seeing all the great implementation of these policies in September.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you for all the hard work at the middle school of becoming more efficient, which we all want to be. So thank you for all the hard work. Have a great night. And be safe.
Ms. Robinson.
Just thank you to all the presenters tonight, and have a good night.
Dr. Koifman.
I'd like to second that. Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. Informative. Learned quite a bit. Thank you.
Mr. Kravitz.
I echo what everyone else said. Great job on the presentations. There are a number of things that are still happening during the summer. We have a number of summer programs that are going on, and if the board would like to see any of them, we have our program at North Main, our SPELL program, which has just about 290 students. We also have our Summer Crusaders extended school year program over at the high school for students. So I guess if you'd like to see that, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Mr. Cahill.
So I'd just like to thank and acknowledge the Home Depot Foundation for a $50 donation to Sapphire Elementary School tonight. And with that, I hope everyone has a nice evening. Thank you.
Dr. Vias.
So summer is busy for technology, working on collecting device, cleaning up, getting ready for distribution as the summer ends and beginning of the school year. But a couple of things I want to mention. In a June board meeting, I mentioned about the school messenger. So this is a new communication tool that we are introducing. The current tool we use, the company is no longer be in the education market to support that. We've been working behind the scene. The tool is ready to go. There are a couple of things that we need to work on it, but overall the training went very well. We trained the school administrators and their support staff. We will be so soon in the next week or so, a letter from superintendent will go out to the community. And please pay close attention to the opt-in for the text messages. So the letter will emphasize that, but I think it's a good reminder to make sure that the community members, the parents know that in the current system, we are automatically opt-in. The new system, we need the parent consent to opt in to receive the text message. So we'll spell it out in the letter. We'll send some flyers. We'll also work with the school administrators to educate our parents, and also maybe partner with the PTA to almost like create a campaign to make sure that all the parents receive that and not for the first no day when the delays goes out. So that's one. Parents will also receive a demographic letter, what we call. Our attempt always is to keep the data accurate. Even though we send most of the stuff electronically, there is a value to send a demographic letter in the mail. So parents this week and early next week will receive a letter per their child in the mail. And what we're asking the parents to verify that information listed on that form, obviously the address is accurate, but the phone number, email addresses, those are the modes of communication tool that we use, whether it's a normal attendance call or the emergency call. So once the parents will receive a letter, acknowledge that, and then if there is only send it back if there is a change. If there is no change, no action required. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you. Dr. Hass.
And just thank you to the board for your approval of the code of conduct, and thank you to Chris and to the board for the presentation this evening. I was asked to give a quick update on our esports team. I received a question from the board about the status of that. Real quick, 2023, we started an esports team. It's a sanctioned interscholastic athletic program through Section 9. Our first year, we competed using a game called Rocket League. We started the team because we had a gaming club up at the high school that was a very, very popular club, and we wanted to take it to the next level and have the students start to compete interscholastically. There was not a lot of interest because of the game that we had selected for that year, so we changed the game last year to a different game that was of higher interest in speaking to the students. The challenge at the beginning of last year's season, the spring '24 season, was we lost a coach just before the season started, and we kind of scrambled in order to try to find another individual who would kind of pick up the program. That happened sort of later on in the process. The person who stepped up to do it, I believe, is interested in continuing with the program. Another recommendation that we're going to be making next year is moving the team from the spring season to the winter season, which is a little bit more conducive to student interest. So they're going to use the fall to kind of raise awareness to the team, hopefully build interest with the student body, and then we believe that we're going to have more numbers at the start of the winter season. So good things to come for the esports program, I believe.
Ms. Hawk?
Things are in full swing in the HR world. The hiring has been ongoing, and our instructional staff we're in very good shape with having people in place for our instructional staff. We do have to replace Gina now, though. So we're shifting our focus to our non-instructional staff, and with that, we really are making a push to attract community members for positions such as substitutes. We need people in the food services, we need more drivers, attendants, and a lot of people serving in substitute areas across the district. So we're going to be announcing a job fair or hiring event. We have a meeting about that coming up very soon. We will have a date, and we will start doing some promotions so that we can attract people from our own community to work in our district.
Okay. Dr. Norman?
Good evening, everyone. I can't say enough great things about our community. My transition is going extremely well. I've had the pleasure of visiting our summer programs. I was very impressed. I've also visited or met with several key stakeholders within our community. Great meetings. I've looked at our platforms. What Power School can do is just simply amazing. And thank you for that orientation that you provided. But also we have some things that I don't know about yet. So I'm still looking to meet with several other key stakeholders to learn more. But overall, I just want to say thank you for giving me the grace and the time, and for the people that have met with me. And Elsie Rodriguez is simply amazing. So thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
So I'm going to say the same thing about you. I am truly, truly impressed by Dr. Norman. We've spent a week together. I want to say the board did a really good job in selecting him. We've had great conversations, and it's really a good feeling for me to know that I'm leaving the district in great hands. And we'll spend another month together. I don't know if he's going to say that at the end of the month, but I do feel that you have done an amazing job, and Dr. Norman will do great things with this district. So, and thank you to our presenters, and welcome Gina and all of our new hires. You're coming into a wonderful, wonderful district. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Well, I would like to first thank Ms. Clark for your invaluable help in the past couple of weeks with the transition for me and onboarding our new board members. So thank you for everything that you've done, your guidance and support. And the same, thank you for the presentations. Mr. Berger, it was very comprehensive, and thank you for providing all the details. Dr. Norman, we're excited to have you, just as excited as you are to be here. We think that together we all will do great things. And of course, we will miss Mrs. Rodriguez, but we still have her for another month. So with that, congratulations to all the new hires. Like Mrs. Rodriguez said, this is an amazing place to be and to live. And congratulations, Mrs. Matisse, in your new role. I know that you'll do wonderful things for our students as well. So thank you and good night. And a motion to adjourn into the board retreat.
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries and meeting adjourned.